Okay, let's go. This is a video for my latest collaboration. This is a flagship level in its price and also in its sound quality. It's called the Jupiter. It is the Ziigaat X HBB Jupiter. It is an absolute stunner. It has my favorite cable that has ever been listed on Linsole. It's called the Linsole Loops. It's been around for a long time. I think the most recent reviews probably go back to 2020, maybe almost 4 years ago. I've always loved the cable, and when it came up time to pick a cable to go with it, they said, which one would you like? And with the green caps and the gold, I thought, yeah, I'll go with this. And they pointed out, oh, that's $200 listing. And I said, it's an expensive set. So I think it's the best cable of any set that they've released all of their ThiA audios. And I think this is a better set than all of their ThiA audios, including the Mark III and the Mark II and the Prestige. And I don't script myself, and I thought I might hesitate, but let me just jump in all the way and let me back that up. So there's bias, right? But you guys know that because I always talk about that. I'm a guy that will tell you to buy another set instead of my collab because what you're looking for doesn't match the collab that I'm talking about. For my library, the way that I listen and the recs that I've given and my top 10 list, I might, if I edit this carefully, put up a hypothetical. If I were to rank this, because I won't, but if I were, it would be one above the Mark III for reasons that this very long video likely is going to get into. I think it's a better set. That was the goal, and I think that that goal was reached. Now, let's talk about tuning. This is an important phase because when the Maestro came out, the Grand Maestro, and I believe the Maestro SE, there was a narrative about fat frequency that this whole Maestro series was directed at bass heads. That was the vibe that I got when I first was introduced to the company and was reading things online. But when I listened to my library, I thought that's really not the case at all. And I used, if you go back to that video, at the very beginning, I was standing and looking at that monitor right there and pointing out how the mid bass, which is the most important as it transverses into the mids, related to other very popular sets at that time. And it kind of took away from the whole, this is a bass head set. It can be. But even in its bass head configuration, the Grand Maestro still has great mids. And now, a year later, there's a lot of people out there that consider it to be one of the best out there. And they listen to classical, they listen to jazz. It's very important to pin down stuff and be specific and not use big words and paint with wide brushes. So I'm going to be very specific. The first thing I want to do is I want to talk about what I call, and what you might call, the mid-bass to mids transverse, which means that it's crossing that area. And I've got some sets on here. Let me put up a couple that I'm going to help you move away and not waste your time. The two sets that I just highlighted, one is the Empire Ears Evo, and the other is the Elysian Acoustic Gaia. I think that's what it's called. For me, they have enormous upper mids, so much that I can't really get into it. As you can see, the Evo is just a massive V, but we'll move away from that. It is so unlike my set that if that's your taste, the Evo, and a lot of people like that, or the Gaia, then you should just move along because this is nothing like that. So I'm going to remove these and just X them right out. And now I'm going to show you sets that I think in certain ways are similar and will give you a sense of familiarity with the Jupiter based on what I'm going to say in two key areas. These sets are the Helios SE, which is most different in the mid bass and in the mids, but in the upper mids and in the treble, and kind of in the sub bass, it's similar. It's enough to put in there and to be a kind of a yin to the yang. The Subtonic Storm, the Bird, the Trieli, the Fearless Audio Dawn, which is by far Crin's best collaboration to date. It's a shame that more people don't have it, but that's what happens when the price is that high. And I'll talk about that at the end of the video, why this is the price that it is. The Let's Shore Cadenza, and I believe those are the main sets that I've chosen. Now, the first thing I'm going to talk about is the mid-bass to mids transverse. Why am I talking about that? Because how the mid-bass goes into the mids is probably the most critical part of tuning of anything, of any part of this band that you're looking at between. Let's take 40 hertz and below and acknowledge that its actual impact in the overall replay is actually minimum because there's not a lot of info below 40 hertz. A lot of producers cut below 20 hertz to remove relics and noise that might distract or reduce the quality of the overall production. They literally lop off everything below 20 hertz like a lossy compression, like a MP3, except they're doing it by target and they're not doing it overall, and it's not affecting the dynamic range. But the frequency range, 20 hertz, will be lopped off. So let's say that 40 hertz and below is not really that critical. Okay? And then let's go ahead and look at, let me get my own widget out of the way. Let's go ahead and look at 15 kilohertz and say that effectively and essentially most of what occurs beyond 15 kilohertz is for the uber ears and for mixes that are rare, because all of the music that I measure with a spectrogram, which just turns sound into a visual. If there's anything there, you'll see a visual representation on a spectrogram, which I use and I have. And I have been playing 16 kilohertz signals behind random videos for about a month for a social experiment video that I'm going to do. And nobody's come in and said anything. You know, at a certain point in that video, bro, it sounded like there was this noise going on. Nobody said anything like that. So that means that everybody's, and the YouTube compression and the codec that they use does capture info up there. So it's not related to YouTube and the quality that they put out there. I've had that discussion with some other people. So we take 40 hertz and say, don't put too much into that. We take 15 and push that off. Then we take the measuring device and we say that it's not really accurate beyond 10 kilohertz. I think that's slightly overstated because it's consistent and relative to the mic used. So when you look at measurements, compare it to other ones on the same graph tool and you'll kind of get a sense for what deviation might be. If there's nothing there, there will be nothing there. If there's info there, there will be. The accuracy can be debated, but we're not really going to focus on that. The first thing I want to talk about is between 55 hertz, which is right here, and then I'm going to talk all the way to 300 hertz, which is right here. 300 hertz is a significant point. At 300 hertz, you are audibly impacting male vocals. You like that or you don't like that, depends on how you like your replay. It's a more husky, because of where the fundamentals, it depends on the vocalist as well, but generally speaking, when you get to an elevation at 300 hertz, you're going to start to impact, and you're going to pull in parts of the rhythm section, but we won't really get into that. Let's talk about vocals. Male vocals will be audibly impacted. You like that or don't like that will depend on your taste. It's a kind of a husk. It's not that bad. And it sometimes is an appealing kind of musical type of thing. That same frequency range, 300 hertz, and apply that to female vocals. Now we're talking about something different, because adding a slight husk, a boost to female vocals, female vocals are much less flexible in that area and can change the overall presentation. Taking a clean, crisp female vocal and adding a kind of what I would say husk to it is not something a lot of people like, which is why something like the Helios that you're seeing up there and the way it's got that dropped mid bass and mids, or the Variations by Moondrop that has an elevated sub bass but a tucked mid bass, that's giving a clean replay to vocals. That's what that's for. And it's usually for female because male is much less impacted. The give and take of that is that if you pull that area in like Symphonium's doing with this set or with the Variations, you're going to give a thinness, a lightness, and possibly an unnatural sounding male vocals, bass guitar, and kick drum. Definitely. And the rhythm section is going to sound like it's do you know what a limiter is? Compression filters and limiters on a production deck. It's like it's being pushed back, actually, when you do that with the mid bass. But let's go ahead and talk about specifics. Now start at 55 hertz, which is where you actually are getting a substantial amount of energy. And the Ziigaat is dominating. Not dominating, it's about 2 dB over my own target. It's 3 dB over the Dawn. It's about the same over the Subtonic Storm. That is, at 55 hertz, this thing is hitting very good. Now let's move to 100 hertz, where there's still a lot of energy going on, but we're not anywhere near the point where we're interfering with vocals. By about 2.5 dB and more, the Jupiter is over the Dawn, which has more bass than I thought. The Bird, Trieli, the Subtonic Storm, the Cadenza, the Helios, Now let's get down to 200 hertz. This is where a lot of sets that are audiophile will pinch themselves off, like the original Monarch Mark II, I believe, was at about 200 hertz. You will still impact a kick drum. You will still impact a 4 and 5 string bass guitar. You will still maybe give a slightly thin replay to male vocals, but female vocals will sound great if this is put where it is. And again, my is right on target at 200 hertz with my own personal target, which a lot of companies are actually using as a guide recently. You can go ahead and take a look yourself at some sets that have been released in the last few months, because it's generally pretty good for libraries like mine. Now let's watch from this point, from 200 hertz to where we say at 300 hertz you're getting out of line, literally. The transverse from the mid bass to the mids is going to impact things audibly. So I want you to watch these sets as they jump around from 200 hertz, because Ziigaat's way up at the top. Now it's falling, and it's falling, and it's falling. It's below my target, and then now we're at 300 hertz. Now, in the matter of 100 hertz, which is very, very critical to the replay of libraries like mine, again, male vocals, bass guitars, drum kits. Now, the Fearless Audio Dawn is the most bassy set, which is a set that I love. The Cadenza is next. Then there's my personal target line. Then there's the Storm, and then there's the Jupiter. And then below that is Treble and the Helios. I'm going to go ahead and I'll leave the Helios in there, but it's a very different set. But it's a low Pina set, kind of, so I'm leaving it in there. So you see that between 200 and 300, where it's supposed to correct, it is correcting itself and falling and falling and falling to where I want it to be. And where, if you are interested in a good, clean 4 and 5 string bass guitar, a substantial drop 808 Roland on 90s hip hop, the rhythm section in general, a slight husk on male vocals, a little bit on female vocals, maybe more than you would want, but similar to the Monarch Mark III in that sense. So if you found that to be okay with female vocals, this should be. This has gotten under the line that I set for myself, so this should be fine. It is for me, but if you're concerned about, it's HBB, it's a bassy set, like the Grand Maestro, if we really take a look at graphs, we start to see a clearer picture. And between 2 and 300, which is again critical, I keep beating that to death, but talk to people that do tuning. Tell them where should I be concerned with the bass clearly interfering with the overall quality of the mid replay. And a lot of them will say, 2 to 3. And the 3 beyond is, don't even consider it, and then, or you're just jumping into bass head territory. So embrace that, because that's what you're doing. In that zone, it came out exactly the way that I wanted. Now that is the mid bass to mid transverse, which I think came out brilliant. The next point to talk about is, as it relates to a graph, is we're going to start with the gain now. And we've got the Helios, the Storm, the Treble, the Cadenza, the Dawn, and the Jupiter. And they're all at 60. Okay, that's because it's 1 kilohertz. Durr. I was like, wow, what are the odds of that? Pretty good, buddy, if you're lining up your stuff at 1 kilohertz. Okay, let's go ahead and take it to 1.5, because we're rising now. And we're right there with the Subtonic Storm at 1.5, and we are not quite as much. The Treble to the Ziigaat is 2 dB, and the Treble is most forward, and then the Dawn and the Helios, and then my personal target, which is 62.5, so I'm half a dB below my own target. Now let's go to 2. There we go. We're essentially at the same thing. The Cadenza, I'm sorry, did I mention the Cadenza before? The Cadenza is the lowest at 2, then mine, then the Storm, which is 0.2 dB difference at 2, and then my own target, which is 0.9. I'm under my own target, and then we've got the Dawn, the Helios, and the Treble, and that's 2 kilohertz. I'm not going to break this down to every kilohertz, so let's go ahead and jump to some critical ones. Let's go to 5 kilohertz, because that's a point that is energetic, and some people might like it and they might not. A lot of people look at it. One of my collabs was They were microscoping 5 kilohertz. You know, it's got 2 dB more, and I get it. Okay, I know the energy's there. I know on electric guitars with distortion pedals it can definitely jump out at you. We are right pretty much in the middle. The Storm has 64.7. The Cadenza, mine is almost a dB below the Storm, and it appears to be 1 dB over my own target at 5 kilohertz. So it doesn't have a lot of energy. All of these sets, 4.7 to 2.9, are within 2 dB at 5 kilohertz. None of these are falling off or doing anything ridiculous. The next one is going to be 12 kilohertz because that's clearly in audible range. Let's see if I can find it. There we go. This is, if you do a test tone at 12 kilohertz, you'll definitely hear it. You'll feel it. It'll make your ears ring. You'll get that uncomfortable. Don't ever do swipes or tone swipes across frequency while you're listening. It's not good for your hearing. But if you do that, 12 kilohertz is something that you'll definitely pick up. And if you check spectrograms, there's information there. There's tail ends of cymbal strikes. There's the upper harmonic overtones, which is harmonics overtones, same thing, of electric guitars with distortion pedals. There is some vocal ranges that get up there as well. That being gone is not necessarily something you'll know. That being exceptionally boosted is something you will definitely know. So it can be a spike. Its presence can be a good thing. In a measured quantity, not enough would be better than too much. So if somebody said, would you rather cut it 12K or boost it? I'd rather cut it. That said, the Storm has the most, 3 dB over my own target, but I don't really think that people consider that to be a spiky set. It's my third favorite of all time. The Treble, the Symphonium, the Ziigaat, my Jupiter, the Let's Sure, and then the Fearless are all ranked in that order at 12 kilohertz. Now I'm not gonna, how much time have I spent? That's like 15 minutes on graphs. Okay, well, it's an expensive set and I want to let you guys get a look at the graphs. So summarize this. In the bass, it is perfect. Let me go ahead and take out the labels and leave inspection on. I got energy at 55, which is what I want. I want power. I've got energy at 100, which is what I want. I got power. I've got energy at 200, but now is the point where it's got to drop and it's got to get in line and it's got to transverse into the mids and it's got to do it fast and it's got to do it in the next 100 hertz because everybody knows that this is a critical point. And by the time we get to 300, we have now fallen to the middle or below middle pack, which is exactly where it's supposed to be. And then as we slide across the mids, the Ziigaat is pretty much dead center, right in the middle. It's got a little bit less than the Storm and the Dawn and its forwardness in the mids, but it's got more forwardness in the mids than the Bird and the Cadenza and the Helios SE. And then when we get up to the upper mids, all of these are, let's go ahead and talk about the treble and stretch it out. And let me bring back, just for, that is a different tuning. You can see it. It's lording over everything by a substantial amount. 9. That's like 3 to 4 dB over every frequency range. If that's your thing, this isn't your thing. This is closer to Helios, as you can see. A Bird, a Cadenza, a Dawn. It's not anything like a Gaia. And I'm not pushing on that set because people like it, and that's a reference point for you to say, okay, this is not going to have enough energy in the mid bass or the upper mids for me. Well, if you like the Helios SE's upper mids, you will. And if you like the Dawn and the Cadenza and the Bird and the Storm, this should be enough at 2 and 3 and 4 kilohertz because it's essentially identical to those. Now let's stop being sweet to myself and talk about how this impacts the overall replay. At this point now, I'm going to take out, you know what, I'm going to leave the Helios SE because otherwise it would be a straw man that I've been using. With more bass than all of the other sets, but very similar upper mids and treble, what you're going to essentially have is a 11 driver, 4 EST, a dynamic driver plus BA assisted to get a cleaner transition into the mids. You're going to get a warmer set with more slam, but you're going to have the drivers to present the other. The more drivers you have, is that better? No, but you're taking care of a more narrow band of the frequency response the more drivers that you have. So the chance that an elevation or a peak in one area affecting the same transducer because of its excursion is less likely because it's being tasked with a smaller workload because it's doing a smaller band. So in that sense, more drivers is a good thing. Now this has a dynamic driver where that green boost is over everything, and where you see it starting to get into all of the other sets, sans the Helios, there's a balanced armature there, a 2 actually, and then it gets into the mids, and it's exactly where I would like it to be, and it's in the middle of the pack at 3 and 4 and 5 and 6 and 7 and 8, and all of those critical fundamentals are being handled in the same way as a lot of very famous sets, but the low end's boosted by dedicated drivers. And as we get into the upper mids, we're really handling first, second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, up the scale overtones, harmonics in a very similar way as the other sets that are on this list. The amplitude, which this is an amplitude scale, is indicating great similarities. The treble of any set is a rainbow, where the sub bass, mid bass, and mids, and then also the fall off point is actually kind of critical. There's not a lot of way to do mids. There's not a lot of way to do mid bass either. There is lots of ways to do treble, not upper mids, but treble. There's all kinds of tuning. The Bird is famously, with its cut, it's fantastic because it cuts down on some of the harmonics in vocals that seem to fatigue guitar as well. It's great for long listening. I'm a huge fan of the Bird to this day. A lot of people have moved on and bought other sets. I love that set. I love what it does. That's it right there. If you can see my mouse, get that out of the way. You can see that cut one right there? That's the Bird. That's what's special about the Bird, because it's cut like that. So there's lots of ways to do treble. Upper mids, there's not much. Mids, there's really not any. I would say there's one good way, and that is steady and slow. The mid bass and sub bass are less flexible as well. So that is my overall presentation to you of the Jupiter and its tuning and how it relates to other sets that you might be familiar with. It has more bass than all of the ones I've mentioned. That bass, however, comes in before the impact zone, which is 300 hertz. And it comes in at about the same point as all of the sets that we mentioned. If we put it at 200 hertz, I've got a little bit more by 0.4 dB over the Bird and 0.6 over the Dawn, and then the Storm and the Helios. The Helios is a little bit of an anomaly because of the way that it's tuned, with the mid bass going all the way up to the ear gain, which is a great tuning. That is the beginning. I'm going to definitely put chapters, so there's that, and then we'll just keep continuing because this is a long video. Okay, let's go ahead, put up a border. This is similar to Crinical's collaboration with Fearless Audio called The Dawn, which I think is still by far the best collaboration that he's done to date. It's a brilliant set. It's got a beautiful shell. It's got a nice cable. It was tuned personally by him using a Y2K machine, and it came out excellent. Also, the Subtonic Storm, because it's got an elevated bass and it's also got a Pina that's not unlike the set that I'm talking about today. It's much more expensive. It's got some things about it that are unique, more so than the set that I'm talking about today, my collaboration. But I'm going to use those two sets as examples. One is close to the price of this and one is much more expensive, but they're both very good, as is the Jupiter. Now let's go ahead and take a look at the graph one more time. You see that the Jupiter is sticking its neck out all the way out to 200 hertz and then coming back down. Let's talk about how that impacts your library. If you've got a library like mine, which is hip-hop, rock and roll, classic mostly, but rock and roll, reggae, R&B, classical music, solely Verdi, Vivaldi, and Tchaikovsky. I don't listen to other composers. I don't know where that came from, but that's just how life turned out. Starting with bass, we got Ice Cube here, Menace Society soundtrack, Tupac, UGK, Bun B solo, Ghetto Boys, Kendrick Lamar, Notorious B.I.G., Lil Wayne, stuff like that. This has the low frequency oomph and power at 55 hertz and 100 hertz and a little bit beyond that. Remember, where we cross over subwoofers, you really don't want a subwoofer, not a woofer, a subwoofer playing anything over really 90 hertz ideally. You want it to be really, really centering on its resonant frequency, and 55, 65, 70 really is where it's doing the meat of its work. This is doing excellent in that area. It's assisted by BA as it transverses into the mids, as I've said that word transverse about 50 times today. So it does hip-hop portion of my library very well. As we move to, what are we going to run into first? So Big Boy Killjoy triple drop, lowest being, I believe, 38 hertz. Comes in like a beast. Big crit, big fan. Black Sabbath Master Reality. Good example of masking. Masking is where two things are going on at the same time, around the same or exactly the same spot on a frequency response graph, like a drummer and a bassist doing kind of semi-solos within a track. This being Black Sabbath Sweet Leaf and the session that you're looking at right now in video. A lot of times dynamic drivers, specifically single dynamic drivers, really struggle with differentiating between these two instruments, where it can sound kind of like you're picking up both of them kind of. It's like a blob, but that's an overly negative word. It's just not really ideal, and it's difficult to really pull those apart. Planar drivers, for all of their weak points, the timbre is unnatural. There's a lot of things about planars that people don't like, and I can completely get it, because my home speakers, my car speakers, none of them are planar. I'm familiar with DD. Planar does do something like this and prevents that masking. To put it short, there's everything, and then there's planars when it comes to something like this track that is, according to that thing on my, that's very old, Black Sabbath Sweet Leaf, 2 minute 30 second forward and go on for about 30 seconds from that point. 2 minute 30 second timestamp. Listen to a good planar, headphone or IEM, and listen to a dynamic driver, headphone or IEM, and then you'll be able to get what I'm talking about. Masking is what you're hearing or not hearing. As we move to Bob Marley, sounds great. I want to get to the kick drum on Led Zeppelin's 4th album. It is the iconic, well written about. I think every drummer has tried it. Every teacher has been asked to teach it, but they don't have the equipment that was borrowed by Led Zeppelin from the Rolling Stones, I think. Not sure about that. Microphone hung down a stairwell, and just the production that was done on it is very unique. The point is that this is supposed to be an iconic, powerful dun, 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 dun. This was the track that made the original Monarch become a non-rec for me. And it was the first example of tucked mid-bass where I realized that's not something that I want, and a lot of other. I might bring up, there's a person named Hobby Talk. He did a video about bass tuck. He's a bassist. He might play drums as well. He did a very, very simple, very good demonstration using an EQ and pulling back that area and then not pulling it back, and how the difference is. You could pick that up easily. You don't even need to wear headgear. You can listen to your speakers on your desktop and hear how that presents a drum or a bass guitar, in his example, very, very, very clearly what that does. This type of tuning, all of these sets will do Bonham's drum, including the Subtonic Storm, the Cadenza, the Dawn. Mine having more energy at 150, 200 as it gets into 300, along with the rest of them, has a little bit more power. The graph would indicate that that's the case. That was what I was going for. So it does bass on hip-hop tracks very well. It does bass guitar. There's a track called Please Do Not Go by the Violent Femmes. It's got a bass guitar. It sounds like he's got his strings like slacking. It's very kind of interesting. It sounds brilliant. The pulls, the plucks, and the releases on the bass guitar, there's a live version of that on YouTube that you can check out if you're not familiar with the track. There's also a track, somebody was just talking about Robert Palmer sneaking south through the alley. If Hobby Talk watches this video, go check a track called Sneakin' Sally Through the Alley and listen to that bass line. That is so dope. So dope. You go listen to it if you're not familiar with it. I think the name of the album is Sneakin' Sally Through the Alley. There's 3 tracks that pretty much go back to back in an order that I think is Hey Hey Julia, Sailing Shoes, and then Sneakin' Sally Through the Alley. It's 3 tracks that just glide without there's no dead wax between the 3 tracks. It's just brilliant. But the boom, down, 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 boom, down. There's a solo near the end, Hobby Talk. Just listen to it. If you could play that, I'd love to watch a video of you doing that. The guy's just going nuts. Dope. This plays my library like a boss. That's just the bass section. I'll go ahead and end it there. Okay, let's talk about mids. This is the most... No, I don't want to see you yet. Okay, this is the most critical and the least flexible part of the frequency response range. You can do the treble, let's say 6 to 8 kilohertz and then beyond, in a lot of different ways. You can do bass in, I said earlier, not many ways, but you can do a extremely boosted sub bass, you can do a flat, you can roll it if you want. I don't know why you'd want to do that, but you can do lots of stuff and not completely destroy, depending on the listener's preferences, the entire replay. The mid frequencies are much different because you've got the fundamentals, the core of male and female vocals that are reaching out to about 1 to 1.5 kilohertz, and a lot of the meat of a lot of instruments and a lot of genres, including classical music, rock and roll, really most everything exists in there. So pushing up the mid bass too much into the mids is going to take low frequency instruments, or the rhythm section as I usually say, and push it up against vocals and make it all claustrophobic or worse. It's not a great thing to do. You can take the upper mids and push it up in amplitude and in angle and make literally vocals sound more up in your face to a degree where you'll notice it instantly, and it becomes a calculation that you do very quickly about how long you're going to listen to that set. You might enjoy the intensity, but how long you're going to listen to it is something that you think about clearly, or it's just a subconscious calculation because there's a limit to how long you can listen to that. So there's not a lot of flexibility in the mids. My library is vocal dominant. Only Giuseppe Verdi, Antonio Vivaldi, and Tchaikovsky are not with vocals. I don't listen to OSTs, which I think stands for original soundtracks, much besides Menace to Society. That's about the only one I listen to. Everything else is... I don't listen to OSTs. Synthwave or stuff that doesn't have vocals. Everything I have is vocal-centric. The album that's in front of you right now, Fleetwood Mac Rumors, is famous for many reasons. One is because there was a lot of... Well, it was the best-selling album in history for quite a while, which was a surprise because they weren't like releasing banger after banger. This was literally their best album. There's 2 female singers, and there's 2 male singers, which is important because I use it for vocal evaluation. The 2 female singers are not the same, according to a spectrogram and to anybody's ear. Kristen McVie seems to hit cleaner and higher in the registry, whereas Stevie Nicks has a more throaty, huskier female voice, more centered and anchored in the lower portion of the mids. Almost not male, but kind of like that, so they're not the same. So you've got 2 female singers in this group, and they're not really the same. And then you've got Lindsey Buckingham, who I think is a great vocalist, and he's a fantastic guitarist, doing well. And then you've got Mick Fleetwood, who's essentially a backing singer, and that's where he belongs. So we'll call it 3.5 vocalist. And it's an album that was not overly produced. And by that I mean that when you listen to the finger pulls of Lindsey Buckingham on something like Never Going Back Again, you don't know what it means to win. You catch it all, like being in a room with Lindsey Buckingham, because there's not a wall of sound, which is Phil Spector's theme style. Beatles really brought that to the forefront with their layer upon layer upon layer. You got an orchestra in the background, you got a guys talking in the hallway recorded, you got another layer, they put that together, and it's called a wall of sound. The Rumors album was the antithesis to that. It was not that at all. It was as little and stripped down really as could be compared to a lot of albums that were released at the time, so you can really pick up on the vocals excellent. There's another album by Robert Palmer, and if Hobby Talk by any chance ever gets in here, there's a bass line in Sneakin' Sally Through the Alley. You should listen to the whole. You'll catch the coolness and the funkiness of the being bound down down doon doon doon. As you get to the end of that track, like end of the mid part, keep listening to it because the guy goes into just a brilliant little solo. He's kind of mimicking Robert Palmer perfectly. He's right behind him. It's dope. I don't know if you know how to play that track, but that's just amazing. Robert Palmer's vocals are fantastic on the Jupiter because he's got a lot of energy in his vocals, but this doesn't have a boosted upper mids. and the lower boost isn't really impacting him, but it's giving the bassist a lot of space to play with, and he's not jumping in or crowding Robert Palmer's vocals. There's 3 tracks. One is called Hey, Hey, Julia, you're acting so peculiar. I know I'd never fool you in a million years. You're a strain on my eyes and you're full of surprise. I won't get into that. I just did Put On Your Sailing Shoes. Everyone, put on your sail. And then it goes into this track, Sneaking South the other. There's literally no gap, like dead wax, between these 3 tracks. They just are one track that's split into 3 parts. It's amazing. The album's called Sneaking South Through the Alley. My set does that awesome. My set does Wild Horses by the Rolling Stones. Tired of living, it's easy to do. All of the touchstones that I wanted to get nailed got nailed on this set. It came out brilliant. And I don't script myself, and I'm in the middle of talking about mids, which are amazing, and I'm going to talk about something else. There's some people that say you shouldn't really do reviews for your own collaborations because there's too much bias involved. There's 2 parts to that, really. One I said out loud, and the other is obvious. Bias. I think the bias would be from what? A financial incentive? Let's talk about that for a second. I want this in the middle so you don't miss it. Affiliate links, according to what I just checked online, for Amazon are up to 10%. A lot of people that got a reasonable amount of traffic and a site that's got a reasonable amount of traffic are going to get close to 10%. That's the same as a collaboration. 10 or 15%, depending on the company. 10 would be regular, and sometimes it would be 15. So anybody doing affiliate links and doing a video for item A that's starting to get a little hype and matches their preference, and they say it's awesome, and there's a link down in the description, they're going to get plenty of profit. And people don't really talk about affiliate links anymore. And I guess it's because people got to eat, is what somebody once famously said. And I can get it, so I don't bang around on it too much anymore. But that's not bias. Financial incentive is not bias because they say it isn't. Well, okay. Sure. Okay. That sounds like coping, but whatever. Let's move along to the other one that's more important. There's a lot of people in this hobby that have connections with other people, and you don't know what those connections are clearly. Do you know what the word for that is? You know what the word for unseen connections? That's actually literally what a shill is. When somebody shills, that's actually an old term. Most people in this hobby are not shills, and when they're doing stuff like that, they're not intentionally shilling. But if you've got a connection that people watching you don't know that you have because you ate lunch at a can gym with that person and you're really friendly, and he might be down in your other channels that they can go click on because you like those people a lot and you kind of respect them, that's not going to infiltrate somebody's subconscious and maybe say, it's okay, it's pretty good, instead of stomping on it? Really? Okay, if you say so. So affiliate links and their payments up to 10% per unit moved from somebody that doesn't really, it's just the way it is, that's not a problem. People getting along and being friends with other people, and clearly over a period of 4 years, if you go back and take a look, we're more friendly to a certain group that they're close with, but not as friendly to another group that they're not as close with. That's not proof of a slight bias going on? You don't think so? But me talking about a set that I was directly involved with the tuning and I'm openly endorsing by putting my logo on it, there's something wrong with that, but there's nothing wrong with the 2 that I just mentioned. It must be the autism and the Asperger's, because to my mind, that doesn't make any sense whatsoever. This is clearly going to benefit me if you purchase it. And newsflash, a lot of other people on the platform are going to benefit in one way or the other, whether it's financial units moved or deepening a connection bond by being a loyal soldier and getting more gear sent next month, in 6 months, in 1 year, and keeping their channel or their platform alive by having content, which is items. And without that, you have nothing. You guys see the kind of weird... I can get why some people make the personal decision, but just in black and white terms, it doesn't make any sense to me personally whatsoever. And that is stuck in the midsection so that you absolutely don't miss it. And if you want to talk about it in more detail, go ahead and talk about it in the comment section. I would love to engage with people because it seems like hypocrisy to me. It seems like a set of rules being applied to something, but not something that's almost identical because of reasons. I've been doing reviews for my collabs from the beginning, and I will do it until I stop doing them. So cope with that. And every set that I've said does a certain kind of thing actually does that certain kind of thing. And I use my library to tell you that. I use a moment in a track like Black Sabbath Sweet Leaf, 2-minute, 30-second timestamp. The masking on the Jupiter will be good and on par with other sets in its price range, but it won't be quite as clear with good planars. I've said that about everybody else's set. I say that about my own. There's no inconsistency ever. And that's the mids plus the thing I stuck in there because I don't want you to dare miss that. Let's talk about treble, huh? Okay, let's talk about treble. Can I crash this? I want to get up to Van Halen because Eddie Van Halen with his distortion pedals is just some chaos. Where are we? Van Halen. There's Rolling Stones. Tired of living's easy to do. How many Van Halen 2s do I have? My God. Eddie Van Halen, I might put up a video if I'm going to have to download one. His solos are iconic. There's a ton of energy going on. Eruption is one of them. It's basically kind of his signature. He's a brilliant guitarist. Joe Satriani, Stevie Ray Vaughan, Jimi Hendrix. A lot of electric guitars with distortion pedals are going to create a lot of chaos and energy, a fuzz and a noise that's can be fatiguing, annoying, difficult to put up with a long period of time, and if the production is of lower quality, like a lot of Hendrix's stuff, it just sounds kind of like a mess, but there's a lot of energy up there in the treble. Listening to something like Randy Rhoads doing a classical exercise that was not supposed to be recorded, or at least he wasn't aware of it, and they actually put it on the album, Blizzard of Oz, I believe, is one of the examples that I use for what resolution is, and I'll talk about resolution right now within treble. Resolution is the ability to discern subtle nuances within a track that you know exists but are not necessarily expecting to show itself all the time. In fact, you get comfortable not expecting it because most of the time it doesn't appear there. Whether it's an Easter egg of a Michael Jackson track, left channel beat between 1:28 and a minute 31 that is clearly a production error on a famously produced album. It's really a key for a moment in the studio for something to occur, and they didn't remove the key. It's a double ping. Breathing into a mic. There's a Elton John track where you can hear the pedals being pushed. It's from something Brown Dirt Cowboy. I can't remember the name of the track. I'll write that down and cite it when I do Easter eggs and update that. Picking up those little things and being like, oh wow, there it is. And it's not because of some ridiculous boost in the frequency response. It's because the quality of the transducers are excellent and they're doing exactly what they were designed to be done. And the rest of the replay through the set, like a Subtonic Storm, for example, is premium. So you're enjoying the whole thing, plus that little extra thing sticks out. That's resolution. My set has high res. I think it has better res than any TA audio that's out there on the market. My opinion. It's got 4 ESTs. It's got upper mids. It's not fatiguing, but it's giving me all of the information that I expect to be there. Let me talk about TA audio for a second. As of the recording of this part of this video, there is no picture of the cable that is right in front of you on their website. I don't have any special graphics like is for the Hype 2 or the 4 or the 10, or you see those nice graphics. I don't have any of that backing me up. I have a headwind that's enormous. I have a price that's more than a lot of their stuff. I have an army of people that are fans of that seller and what they sell, which means that if there is a TA that's comparable to this, and even if it's got not 4 but 2 ESTs, and even if it's got 2 DDs and not 1 plus a BA assisting, there maybe will likely probably like the Thea, because there's going to be 4 of them coming out next year, or 5, or if this hype series become used more. There's a train behind one, and there's not behind this one. And if you look at the promotion quality, go look at the presentation page for this. It says you get earphones in a box. There's nothing really specific. There's no photograph of the cable. The most beautiful cable that they sell on their whole website is not even photographed with the set. Because when I was approached to do the collab, it was more from a manufacturer than a seller. So the amount of the pie that goes to, look at the consumer electronic advertisement for Linsel. Of course they're pushing Thea Audio. That's their house brand. I completely understand it. My set's not up there. My set doesn't have those nice graphics that the hypes have. My set doesn't have the backing of a bunch of people that have reviewed 4, 5, 6 Thea Audios, and they're going to get another one, and then another one, and then another one. And then this thing's going to come along. And I have to count on them judging strictly on music and not on anything else. Like we were talking about before, biases known or not known. I got a lot of headwind in front of me. And I'm not even telling you guys the whole story because I'm not going to make drama. The manufacturer behind the set is outstanding and makes sets that you don't even know. You will someday. So the QC should be outstanding. The cable's amazing. Let me tell you one more thing about this cable, because I just got to say this. When this box was sent to me with this set in it, it contained a cable. And I don't know if it was like a placeholder, but when I saw it, my heart sank because I thought, what's going on? I immediately got onto Linsel's website and I bought the loop myself. I might not put that up, but I might put it up. Because I was really, it all became kind of real. I realized it, what was going on at that moment. There's a smaller piece of the pie, so there's less motivation to push the item. Now, when the Melee came out, it was the same. There was this thought that it's not going to sell. And I get a mail 30 minutes after Melee started, and it sold 500 in like 30 minutes. And then over the course of the first day, it sold thousands. And I got a mail saying, oh my God, this is so wonderful. I can't believe we can't keep up. And I'm thinking, what did you think was going to happen when somebody that has a library-specific presentation and says that this set plays back my library well? What were you expecting to happen? And they said to me that the first collaboration, which was the expensive one, which is one of my examples I'm comparing with, sold a handful over the first several months. So that price point, collaboration, it just doesn't matter. And $50 Melee, which was the first affordable collaboration, it just, the idea of collaborations was kind of being let go of at that moment, and then Melee switched it all. So I know what it's like to be not believed in and then to have the narrative switched. Because when the 10 sets went up that were reduced in price, there's a market or there's not. Those are gone. I told somebody in Japan on Twitter live, I'll get the code for you and I'll send it to you by DM. By the time I got contacted back, the codes are gone. Those are sold out, and people are buying it at its regular price. And some people are kind of surprised, and I'm surprised that they're surprised. After all of the sets, after all of the collaborations, after several platforms show my collaborations being among the top sellers every year, there's still this weird lack of support. I got to include this in me talking about music because it's part of the whole story. And if you are thinking, I don't understand why Thea would release something that's eating into the... They didn't. They didn't. That's my problem. That's not yours. Don't worry. They're not redundant. And the machine that can support one with great vigor and energy and tentacles worldwide is not the machine that works for me. And I don't care. If you trust me, my library, what I say, you'll be satisfied with this set. It punches above its price point. What did he just say? Did he just say a $1,500 set punches above its price point? There are lots of sets that cost the same amount of this set or more and are tuned ridiculously. In the bass, because they got none, they got way too much. Treble, because it's got none or it's got way too much. So yeah, I just said what I said and I'm not taking it back. That's my set. I'm going to leave it there. I want to say thank you to the manufacturer for putting up with me and doing what I asked you to do and doing it exactly and putting up. And that's the only thank you I've got in this video to anybody else. You can read into that what you want. I look forward to the comparisons with other sets, particularly Thiers. I genuinely look forward to that. There's going to be a few people out there that are all about the music, and I don't have any connections to anybody. I'm looking forward to what they have to say. That's just brilliant and bonkers. And I paid for that cable. And I'm out.
逆にさっきパパって言ってたね。ね。